I'm gonna touch myself a little bit. I'm gonna have my free hand on my chest. And as I'm moving, I'm gonna feel the muscle working. I'm gonna create that awareness, visual, internal as well. And now I'm gonna, once I get better at contracting that muscle, I'm gonna go in the gym. I'm gonna add some weight there. I'm gonna do some dumbbells. Gonna figure out what works, what I feel, and start from somewhere. I mean, maybe you're not going to feel your barbell bench press, but maybe you're going to feel the cable press. Okay, just do more cable pressing. Get very good at cable pressing. Get that nice awareness. Close your eyes, do the movement, and be aware of the fibers contracting. Imagine the muscle working. And if for you the cable press does this, awesome. Get amazing at contracting your chest with the cable press. All right. So I'm going to start off with a lecture as you guys have seen. It is about how to bring up a lagging body part. I'm going to talk about some common misconceptions and then how do we deal with this, how we can actually bring up a body part that is not developing as well as some other body parts. But first off, let's talk about like what is a lagging body part. Sorry. Essentially, we're talking about a muscle that for whatever reason, it is not growing as much as other muscles. And this could be quite subjective because if you take different individuals, they're going to look very different and they're going to have different muscles developed to a different extent. And in a sense, it's also a perception. For example, you may feel like you have small biceps, but your biceps are growing pretty well and they're growing much faster than, let's say, your triceps or your in relation to your triceps or some other body parts, but you in your mind you feel that they're small. And it in a sense it could be true, but sometimes certain muscles, due to their shape, due to their attachment, and sometimes even it's not the muscle itself, it is the surface. For example, the shape of your rib cage or the size of your structure, your bones, how things are attached in terms of the structurally skeletal mass, skeleton. This could influence how things look and how they feel. So sometimes something may feel pretty big, but in reality, it's not that big. It's just a visual thing there. And actually, people who have amazing physiques, they're not always the most muscular, the biggest guys, but visually, aesthetically, they look good because of just how things are combined structurally. So a lagging body part may not necessarily mean that something is not growing. In a sense, it could be growing, but something else is just much bigger, or its baseline size is bigger relative to some other body part. So that's the first thing to figure out. Like, are you actually growing? Which, in order to know that this is true, you can take some measurements. You can take a tape measurement. You can take some photos, and if you are taking measurements of different body parts, then you can see how fast each one of them is growing in relation to the rest of your body. And this way you can be sure that, oh my God, this is not growing for sure. Though, of course, there are some limitations there because, for example, if you're bulking, you're going to be adding muscle, depending on your bulk, and you're going to be adding some fat as well. So certain measurements may be going up faster than other measurements because you're also accumulating more body fat there. A good example is your waist. So your waist circumference could be increasing quite a bit due to adding a lot of body fat and not so much muscle there. But if you don't tend to add that much weight, for example, fat, if you don't add that much fat on your arms, then you're going to be growing. The ratio between muscle and fat is going to be in favor of muscle. So if you are increasing the size or the measurements for your arms are increasing, then most of it is muscle, which is good. But for the waist may not be the same because you're probably getting more fat there versus muscle. So point I'm trying to say there is when we're talking about lagging body parts, you want to be sure that they're indeed lagging, that they are not growing. You want to look back and see how things are developing over time. And for you to have this information, it takes time. Like you have to be training for a while and monitor how things are developing. If you just start training, you just don't have that information yet. And some people, for whatever reason, they have more. So you've seen people like this. They have very developed shoulders and they have maybe not that developed arms or legs or whatever happens to be the case with them. But this could be their baseline. But once they start training, things may reverse. Maybe their legs were big to begin with, but as they start training, their legs are not developing as fast as their arms. So that's one consideration before we even talked about how to deal with the lagging body part. Then once you figure out, okay, this body part is not growing, a common approach to develop a lagging body part is going to be just do more volume, do more exercises, do more sets, do more for that specific muscle group. But now we have to consider quality versus quantity. And sometimes if the quality of your workout or if of your training for that muscle is not there, you're not able to contract that tissue properly, throwing more quantity is not going to do that much. And this is, of course, comes down to understanding basic anatomy, which I'm not going to talk too much about this. I'm just going to give you the general gist of it. But if a muscle is not growing, it is usually because you don't have that much control over that muscle and cannot control it and contract it properly during the workout. So other muscles have to take over, or maybe a lot of the volume that you're doing, a lot of the work that you're doing is wasted. And of course, you can do more sets, you can just do more, but you're doing more subpar work to make up for the quality of the work. And a good test that you can do is try and contract that muscle without any load. So for example, if your arms are not growing, your biceps not growing, your triceps not growing, can you go through that full range and fully contract the muscle and fully lengthen the muscle? So you can do a bicep curl and just see how well you can contract that muscle. Can you feel that muscle? Do you have control over that movement? Same thing goes for your chest. Like if you cannot properly go through the range and fully contract your muscle and have awareness of that muscle, this means that once you load an exercise, you're probably not going to get that much out of that exercise either. So if you're never feeling your back on an exercise, well, can you feel your back? Let's talk about the lats, a very specific muscle in your back. If you are unable to contract your lats without any weight, and you don't own that movement, you're not going to be able to do that when you load, when you get under the bar, when you grab the handles, when you are doing a specific exercise. So it is a very simple test. And of course, we should adjust for the individual. Like if you have some kind of a pathology there, if you have arthritis, if you have any issues there, sometimes it may not be the problem with the muscle itself. It could be some other muscles that are guiding the movement. But we need to take in the individual. Can you own that contraction? Can you engage that muscle without any weights? That's the first question. If you can't, now we probably have a problem and we need to address this. And of course, we need to consider what you have, what you own. Do you have any injuries? Do you have anything that else is preventing you? For example, if you are, if you torn your meniscus, or if you have an ACL tear, or you have some missing ligament there, if you had surgery in the past, that is something that may impact your ability to contract that muscle. And maybe you can do something about this, or maybe you can't. Obviously, and like I say, limitations. And when I talked about full range, sure, if you have arthritis or if you have some joint issues, you may not be able to go through that full range. You may not be able to fully contract that muscle or fully lengthen that muscle, which is okay. Obviously, we're working with what you have. But now, assuming that you're healthy, look at the muscle. So you should be able to fully shorten and fully lengthen that muscle if you're healthy, of course. If you can't, then just work with what you got there. And if you can go to these two ends of the range, you're good. And if you can own those two ends of the range, it means that you can control, you can go through there without pain, without issue. Okay, this is what we're working with. And of course, you should have basic understanding of anatomy. So if you want to train your biceps, it's a good idea to know where your bicep is, how it looks, and what it does. Again, with this call today, I'm not going to go through this. Maybe I can give some examples later. But if you're unable to grow your back, okay, what's the back? What are the muscles on the back? Because the back is not a muscle. There's a bunch of different muscles. There's actually a lot of muscles. So we need to focus on the muscle, not just the area of your body where you're not able to grow your legs. Okay, what muscles on your legs? Front side, back side, big muscles, smaller muscles, upper leg, lower leg, which part, which muscle. Now, once we figure out the specific, we can talk about the range, we can talk about the movements and so on. And I also want to mention the value of posing. If you really struggle to feel a muscle, do some posing in front of the mirror. Obviously, for the front side, it's going to be pretty easy. I mean, you can flex your biceps, you can flex your chest. But if you are really struggling to bring up a lagging body part, try and contract it. Stand in front of the mirror and do some contractions there. For the back side of your body, it's going to be a bit hard, but this is actually something that I'm doing. I'm not even lying. When I was struggling to feel my lats, what I would do, and this is almost every day, I would grab a mirror, a hand mirror in my hand, obviously, and then I would stand. There would be a big mirror behind me, so I would have one mirror in front of me, so I can see my back as well. So I have like two set of mirrors there a couple of days, so I can get a different angle and can view my back. And I would try to flex, lower my arm, bring my arm up, just go through different positions. And in my case, I was lucky enough that I was lean enough, but I can see how the muscle is moving. Even if you're not that lean, at least you get some visual reference there that something is moving, and then you can tie in that movement with that sensation. Because when you move your arm, when you do a specific movement, when you're trying to contract a tissue, then at least you get the visual reference that something there below your skin is moving, and you have an idea of which body part there is moving, and you can be more aware of that muscle. Obviously, from the front, for the front side, it's going to be easier. Like if you want to move your chest, then you can just stand in front of the mirror and try and flex your chest and just go through different movements and figure out, okay, if I do this with my arms or with my shoulders, I feel my chest. But if I do that other thing, I don't feel my chest that much. So pose and try to be aware of the muscle lengthening, the muscle contracting, the muscle moving, the muscle doing something. So you want to create that awareness without any weights and understand your body better. And maybe you get some cues there. If you can, just use one arm and place it on the working muscle. So if you want to get a sensation of your chest working, you can place one arm on your pecs. This is the pectoralis muscle, the main chest muscle. Place it there on your pecs and start moving your other arm. And then you're going to notice that as you're moving one arm, you can feel some bulging of the muscle, and you have your hands there, so you can immediately be aware of this. So this is going to create some sensation, and also what you touch, where you place your arm, is going to instantly make you more aware of that body part. It's actually a cue for example, if I'm coaching somebody in person, what I would do is, for example, they're contracting their hamstring, they're doing some leg curls. I will place my hand on their hamstring, and they immediately are going to be aware of where I'm touching them. I mean, obviously not in a non-sexual way. So if I place my arm on your hamstrings and you're doing leg curls, you're going to immediately be aware of your hamstrings working. Your attention is going to be there. So this is something that you can do yourself. Obviously, if you can reach that body part, place your hand there, place a couple of fingers there, and as you're moving, feel the muscle bulging, contracting, lengthening, and so on, going through the range. And that is key. If you can own that movement, if you can contract that muscle without having to load some weight, you're awesome. Now, once we add some weight, once you actually start doing the exercise, things are going to start happening. And this is true for most body parts. If you have trouble feeling your abs, for example, well, you know what? Stand in front of the mirror and try to flex your abs. It will be hard if you're not lean enough, but you can still feel that, even if you have a bit of fat. I mean, place your hands there on your abdominals and start flexing, and you probably can feel something bulging, the muscle contracting, the muscle trying to pop up below the fat tissue. And at some point, you're going to get the idea of what this muscle does. And you can go online and just Google, let's say you're struggling with your rhomboids. Type in rhomboids, functions, insertions, or rather just get some pictures first. That would probably be the best. Rhomboid pictures, rhomboid muscle. Get some pictures there. Get a visual reference of how it looks, where it attaches, the general area of your body where it sits. And then maybe type in rhomboid functions, and then you can see what the muscle does. Maybe you can get some visuals there. And then maybe you can go on YouTube and type in rhomboid training bodybuilder. The reason why I say bodybuilder is because they're lean enough, so you can usually see those muscles working. So not only you see the exercise, but you can even see that muscle working and going through its fully lengthened and full short position, or maybe like just through some part of that range. And that would be the best thing you can do in order to improve the quality of your contractions and the quality of your work. And you don't have to do a ton of poor quality reps or sets in order to be able to contract that tissue. Now, other than this, I want to also talk about stability. A lot of times your inability to engage a muscle is because you're lacking some stability, and could be internal, it could be external. Say, for example, you're doing a bicep curl and you may be thinking, okay, I cannot contract my biceps, I don't feel my bicep. The reason why this is the case is not that there's a specific problem with your biceps, maybe something on the other side. Maybe there's some issue with your triceps. The tricep is not working properly, and because these are, let's call them antagonistic muscles. One is going to be the resistance fighter, the biceps, for example, for if you're doing a dumbbell curl, the biceps is going to directly fight the resistance. But on the backside, you have the tricep that's going to guide the movement. It's going to stabilize the joint. And if your tricep is not working properly, then your biceps is going to be affected. If your triceps cannot guide the movement, cannot stabilize the joint, your brain will automatically down-regulate the bicep, because you don't want to be working, you don't want to be lifting something heavy when you're not stable. There's a high chance of injury. It's like trying to lift weights on ice or just moving on ice. You're going to be very unstable, and your ability to generate force to express your strength is going to be lowered, because your brain recognizes that this is not stable surface. I don't want to try and fully engage my muscles because I may get injured. If I try to produce a lot of force, I'm going to be unstable. I'm going to fall. Something's going to happen. I'm going to break something. I'm going to tear something. No. We're not going to do this. So stability is key. And sometimes there could be like a pathological reason. There could be an injury that is destabilizing certain part of your body, that is affecting the muscle that you're trying to work, in which case you may have to work with a physio. Or sometimes maybe something on the other side is tight, is weak. I hate these terms, but for the sake of the example, and they're not working properly. So it's good idea to recognize this. And if you're struggling to engage a muscle, you're not really feeling it, think of what is on the other side that is also stabilizing maybe the joint, or that is helping guide the movement. Obviously, the tricep and bicep example is pretty simple, but if we're talking about, for example, your chest, man, or your shoulders, man, there's so many things that attach there, so it can get pretty complicated. But a good general approach is, if you're doing a pushing movement and you struggle with engaging your chest, think about your back and maybe try and do some rowing motions, and see if your back is tight and if you can fully contract your back muscles. Maybe, your rhomboids are not firing properly. Maybe they're too weak. And because they're weak, your brain is going to down-regulate your pec muscles, because the stuff on the backside that's supposed to stabilize and guide the movement, it is not working. It cannot contract properly, it cannot hold a position. So you don't want to be pushing too hard on the front side. And again, that's not always the case, but oftentimes that could be a problem. And it could get pretty complicated depending on what exercise we're talking about, what joint, especially if it's something that attaches around the shoulder. So it could be the glenohumeral joint, it could be in the scapula, clavicular area, like different body parts. You don't need to understand everything that I'm saying. The point I'm trying to make is, it's not always a problem with the muscle itself. It could be with a different muscle, and having, let's go with some kind of imbalance there. Something that is not necessarily weak, but something on the other side that is too weak or too tight, or whatever the case is there. And if possible, try to get it strong. Again, always think of what is on the other side. I have the muscle that is fighting the resistance. What is the muscle on the other side that is guiding the movement or stabilizing the joint? And sometimes you may, just go through different motions. Again, just play around with your shoulders and with your legs. Go through, just get better awareness of your body. Move around and feel if something is off, if something is tight, if something is limited in terms of what you can get. Compare left side versus right side. And I'm not saying you should be balanced on left versus right side. I'm just saying that it could at least give you some idea there of like a reference. If one side moves a certain way and the other side is limited in its movement, okay, something that is going on. And it could be something that there's nothing you can do about this. It's just how your body is structured, or how life has shaped your body due to wear and tear and so on. Could be the case. I don't know. But sometimes if one side is moving nice and the other side is a bit too restricted, okay, maybe something that is going on. And you may find that, okay, the right side of my back is a bit tight. And then my right side of my chest is actually not growing that much. Okay, maybe there's some connection there between these two. And of course, you're using the left side as a reference, which, as I'm saying, it's not always a good idea, but just create better awareness of your body. So this is something that you can sort of do as a self-assessment. And then if you find that, okay, something is weak there, maybe you can work on it. And then once you get that other part weak, the synergistic muscle, the antagonistic muscle, the stabilizer muscle, whatever you decide to call it, you may find that, okay, now I can contract my lagging body part better. So the solution was train something else, do more volume, do more work, and focus on a completely different muscle than the one you're trying to work, because it is the limitation there. Now, it could also be just a intent-based or execution technique when we're lacking stability of the joint. And a stable joint is going to allow the muscle to work properly. So a good example is, I'm gonna go back to bicep curls a lot because just a very easy visual example to give. So if you're doing a bicep curl, and obviously you're bringing your forearm up, the movement is in the elbow joint, and ideally your upper arm should be stable. So the only thing moving should be the forearm going up and down, up and down. But you've probably seen this in the gym. Sometimes people start swinging the weights up and their elbow, instead of pointing down, assuming you're doing an upright bicep curl standing, in which case your elbow is going to be pointing down. But if you start using some momentum and start bringing the elbow up and your elbow is all over the place, going up and down, maybe shifting to the side, well, guess what? The bicep is acting at the elbow joint. Well, technically the shoulder as well, but for the most part, the muscles that you're trying to work are acting at the elbow joint. So if the elbow is not stable and it's all moving all over the place, basically the shoulder is not stable, you're not contracting from a stable surface, and your brain is immediately going to start deregulating the engagement of the bicep because you're not moving from a stable place. So you want your shoulders to be stable, you want your elbow to be stable, and you want only the forearm to be moving. So creating that intent and that internal stability can make a big difference. Another example will be, let's say you're doing a squat. So with a squat, you want your spine to be stable. You want your trunk to be stable. And if there's a lot of movement in your midsection, in your lower back, and you start leaning forward, you start hunching over, you start arching your back, all of this is going to affect a little bit to generate force. Or for example, if you try squatting on a bossa ball, yeah, probably nobody's doing this. I guess nobody on the program. But or let's say you try squatting on sand or something unstable, you're immediately going to downregulate your ability to squat, engage those muscles. So we're talking about internal and external stability. Internal is, for the squat, the example will be brace your core, keep your midsection tight, keep your spine neutral, and make sure that only the joints or at least the muscles that you want to work attaching to the joints. How to explain this? Basically, the joints that are doing the work, they should be the only ones moving, and then the joints that are supposed to be locked in place, they should be stable. Because the way you have joint movement, these are the muscles that are going to work. When joints move, muscles are engaged. So if you see movement in a joint, you can usually figure out which muscles are going to be working there because you know which muscles are generating motion in that joint. So anything else that is moving in terms of a joint means that other muscles are also moving, and maybe you don't want those muscles moving. Maybe you want them to stabilize. So for example, if your spine is moving and is twisting and you're arching your back, well, you want those joints. Basically, this is going to be your vertebra, your spine. You want them neutral. You don't want movement there because that's going to create instability and it's going to affect the movement of some other joints that you want moving, which are going to be your knees, your ankles, your hips. And of course, attaching to those joints, you're going to have your quads, your hamstrings, your calf muscles, and so on. So you want to make sure that joints that are there to provide stability, they're not moving, which means that the muscles attaching to those joints are also not moving. So the example with a bicep curl would be the stuff that is attaching to your shoulder needs to be static. You want to stabilize your shoulder because this is going to stabilize your whole upper arm. And then only the forearm is moving, which means that the elbow flexors are going to be moving there, going to be active. Sorry. So with a couple of specific examples. So let's say you're going back again to the bicep curl. You want to stabilize your shoulder. How do you stabilize your shoulder? Well, as you get in position, bring your shoulder down. Try to engage your lats. Try to engage your scapular muscles. So basically, think about all the muscles that are attaching around the shoulder, and you want to have them tense. So tense up your core as well. Maybe like flex your abs slightly, stand in position, and everything, like flex anything that is not supposed to be moving. Keep it tight and bring your shoulder back. Be aware of your shoulder starting to move. And if it starts moving, again, stabilize it using different muscles. Again, I'm not going to be very specific here because you may not be aware of which muscles attach where, but you want to stabilize the shoulder. If you are doing squats, again, you want to stabilize the spine. If you are doing some tricep exercise, again, you want to still stabilize the shoulder. If you are doing some, say, pressing exercises, chest exercises, you want, for the most part, to stabilize your trunk, although that could be some movement there because you're breathing. And if you are breathing, that's immediately going to change the position of your ribs. And there's going to be a bit of a trunk movement there, but it's going to be minimal. But you want to hold the position and want to stabilize your trunk. So this is going to be like just the internal stability. You want to keep everything tight. That is not supposed to move. And the only thing that's moving, that should be the target joint / muscle. So on the pressing exercises, what's going to be moving there? Your shoulders and your elbows. If they're moving, fine, it's good. But if you are shifting, if you're standing to the side, if your rib cage is consistently like shifting back and forth, other than the normal for breathing, or if you're trying to adjust your hips are not stable, that's going to create some issues there. With pulling movement, same thing. You want to stabilize the trunk. That's why a lot of the exercise that you guys are having usually have some kind of chest support or another way of stabilize. So for example, if you're doing a 1-arm row, you want to have the opposite arm on a bench or somewhere for support because you don't want to be twisting and rotating your trunk. And your feet are going to be on the floor, or maybe your knee is going to be on the bench. Again, you're stabilizing the hips, you're stabilizing the trunk, and the only thing that is moving there is going to be your shoulder and your elbow joints. So always think about the exercise that you are doing, the muscles that you're engaging, where those muscles are connected, which joint. And pretty simple. Like most of your pressing exercise, most of your chest training is going to involve shoulder and elbow movement. So anything else should be stable. Most of your pulling movements, aka back movements, are going to be, again, engaging your shoulder and your elbow joint. So you want to stabilize, again, the trunk. Now, for the lower body, we're going to have your, let's call them quad-based exercises, squats, lunges, and so on. So your trunk should be stable. Your joint moving there are going to be your hip joint. But for most leg exercises, at least for the big muscles, it's going to be your hip, your knee, and your ankle. Sometimes it could be only the knee joint if you're doing some kind of an isolation exercise, if you are doing, let's say, leg curls or leg extensions. And then your trunk, for the most part, should be stable. So you don't want to be flinging your arms all over the place. Hold on to something. And this is actually a good segue into external stabilization. So sometimes no matter how much contract muscle, you're not going to be able to stabilize properly, or it's going to be very hard for you to stabilize. So the example that I gave there with chest support, or even like bench, like if you're doing bench pressing, external stability is going to be the bench. Like you're pressing on a bench. The bench is going to keep you stable. If you're, I don't know, doing a pressing exercise on a yoga ball, it's going to be moving all over the place. It's going to be compressing as you're going up and down. It's not going to be very stable. So sometimes we can create that external stability. That's why a lot of the exercises that we're doing, they're either seated or on a bench, or you're having some external way to stabilize. On most machines, you have that ability to stabilize because you have a seat. You have some restrictions there to restrict movement. But if you can use some external aid for stability, that's awesome. Like be aware of anything that's moving there. And if you can prevent movement by doing something, that's great. So with rowing exercises, I love chest stability because this is immediately gonna give you an external cue, like you're pressing towards the pad, towards the bench. And as soon as you start moving your trunk, you lose that sensation, or you become immediately aware of this, and you know that you're no longer stable. Another thing that I guess we can include here is belts. You've seen those lifting belts that people wear. That's again like external stability. And in a way, it's also internal stability. So the belt itself, it's not gonna prevent an injury, but when you brace, you're bracing against the belt, and you become aware of you bracing against the belt. And if you, for example, deflate or lose your tightness in the core, you're gonna lose contact with the belt. So that's immediately gonna tell you, you know what, I'm no longer stable there. Something is moving, something is shifting. I can also place my hand on what's a good example? Let's say you're doing a bicep curl. I can place my hand on your triceps on the backside, and I may not even be doing anything there. I'm just having my hand there, and then as you're doing a bicep curl, if you start flinging your elbow up and down, you're going to immediately be aware of this because you're going to lose contact with my arm that's on the backside. So I'm going to immediately be able to tell you know what, something is moving there. So we want to think about stability and ways to generate that stability. Anything that it's not supposed to be moving should, for the most part, be stable. Of course, there are exceptions, but if you are working on a specific body part, as I said there, with the main pushing, pulling movements, it's going to be shoulders and elbows. Like that's the stuff that's moving. Stabilize your trunk. Use a bench, use support, and so on. And that could be one of the benefits of doing bilateral exercises. So this is working both sides at the same time. So for example, if you try and do a single dumbbell chest press, you're going to notice they're going to be very unstable, and you're probably going to be able to lift less weight because you're lacking stability. There's nothing to balance you on the other side, and your body will try and rotate to the side that you're pressing. And because you're not stable, because your trunk is moving, you're not going to be able to press as much. You're not going to be able to engage that muscle as much as well. Cables are also sometimes interesting. For example, cable pressing exercise or cable flies. If the weight is light enough, that's awesome. But once the weight gets heavy, you notice this is true for other cable exercises. Once the weight gets very heavy, the cable will try to pull you in that direction, and you're going to lose stability. So if you're doing some kind of a rowing exercise on a cable machine, you're going to notice at some point when you're going towards the pulley, your whole body, your whole torso is going to start leaning forward, and it's going to be very hard for you to control the movement. So what you may have to do in a lot of cable exercises is once the weight gets too heavy and you're fighting for balance more than actually doing the movement, the exercise itself, find a way to stabilize yourself. If you are doing, for example, a cable fly and you find the cable pulling you back, sit on a bench, have a bench in front of the cable machine. On a cable row, again, find a way to stabilize with your feet down, like pressing against something, or maybe use some chest support. And certain exercises may be okay when the weight is light, but when the weight gets heavy, it starts affecting stability there. And you may need to find a way to balance this. Again, the cable exercises are pretty notorious for this, and sometimes I do them one side at a time. Because I can use my opposite hand to grab onto something to stabilize myself. If you're doing a 2-arm fly and there's no way for you to grab a bench and have it in front of the cable machine, and the cable keeps pulling you back, well, your only option is, you know what, just do one side at a time with your free hand, grab onto the other side of the machine or grab onto something so you can prevent that rotational force. And you're gonna notice, like, it's insane. Like I've done some tests with this. Having, what was it? I was doing some back exercise, and I literally had a guy place his hand on my shoulder, on my opposite shoulder. So I was doing one side at a time, and he was pressing my shoulder down just to prevent that rotational force that is happening when you're pulling from one side only, immediately it's kind of like a light switch. The fibers of my lats, they fired up. I became super aware of them just by improving stability and having like some external stabilization there. Obviously, I had a guy there. It's not practical if you're training alone, but these are just some of the examples. So to summarize, how to bring up a lagging body part. First off, be aware of whether it is indeed lagging, and how it has been growing over the last months or years. Is it really lagging, or maybe this is your perception there? Are you tracking? Are you taking measurements? Are you taking pictures? Are you comparing to other body parts and how they're developing over time? Are we tracking just pure muscle increase, or are we tracking also body fat increase, and so on? Then be aware of the quality versus quantity. Are you able to contract that tissue? Do you own those contractions? And of course, are you dealing with some limitations there, some injuries, or maybe some imbalances, some pathologies there? And is it the problem in the target muscle, or the problem is somewhere else in a different muscle, in a different structure? And this is where you need to pay more attention to, and you need to develop that in order to create stability. And of course, talking about stability, internal versus external. Internal is just keep anything tight that's not supposed to be moving. Isolate, as if you have a full body cast and only the part that's moving, that's the part that has any kind of degree of freedom. And if you can, maybe add some external stability by using different types of benches, by using your free hand, free leg or whatever, just to stabilize yourself, internal, external stability. And of course, maybe just some basic anatomy there, understanding which is the muscle that you want to contract, how does it look, where does it attach, what it does, sorry. And this could be done on Google. Just if you're not sure, Google, that's your friend. That's how I learn. Like, obviously I've done like many courses and read some anatomy books and done some anatomy classes as well. But at the very beginning, I was like, okay, I want to train my chest. Okay, what are the muscles in the chest? Just type in chest muscles. Oh, it's the pectoralis major. Okay, what is the pectoralis major? How does it look? Where does it attach? How does it work? Okay, let me just look at some people doing some chest exercise, some really lean individuals where you can see the muscle like actually working because there's no fat. And the skin is almost transparent in a way. So you can see the muscle bulging and you can not just imagine, but get that visual reference. All right, this is good knowledge. Let's stand in front of the mirror and let's try and replicate there what these guys are doing on YouTube. I'm gonna touch myself a little bit. I'm gonna have my free hand on my chest, and as I'm moving, I'm gonna feel the muscle working. I'm gonna create that awareness, visual, internal as well. And now I'm gonna, once I get better at contracting that muscle, I'm gonna go in the gym. I'm gonna add some weight there. I'm gonna do some dumbbells. Gonna figure out what works, what I feel, and start from somewhere. I mean, maybe you're not going to feel your barbell bench press, but maybe you're going to feel the cable press. Okay, just do more cable pressing. Get very good at cable pressing. Get that nice awareness. Close your eyes, do the movement, and be aware of the fibers contracting. Imagine the muscle working. And if for you the cable press does this, awesome. Get amazing at contracting your chest with the cable press. And then later, maybe you can work on the barbell bench press. And there's nothing wrong doing barbell bench press in the meantime, but figure out which is the exercise, which is the movement that does it for you. Start from whatever you are able to contract. And to give you a personal example, I had like a lot of issues contracting my specific section of my chest, and I couldn't feel it with a barbell. But as soon as I started doing with cables, at the very end of the range, I could feel that. Okay, that's a starting point. That's the only part, that's the only exercise and the only part of the range which I can feel. So I'm gonna just do more of this. And over time, I figure out I can control more of the range and I can engage that part of my chest throughout almost the full range. And now, okay, this is one exercise where I can feel my chest, feel that specific part of the chest. Now let's see if I can do the same for a different exercise. So probably there's just a bit of there's a specific position, there's a specific exercise, a specific movement where you can feel that. Start from there, build on top of it. And that's going to be the lecture for today. So any questions regarding the lecture, you guys? Anything you want to talk about? Actually ended up being a bit longer. I was thinking it's going to be 30 minutes, but hey, it is what it is.